So in this segment, we're going to be discussing the situation around the bond market, and the fact that the UK is in a fair bit of trouble here. So listen to Sam Coates' analysis of this situation.
Did Rachel Reeves sail too close to the wind in the budget, and are the markets punishing her for that? Right, look at this. What we're looking at here is the cost of government borrowing. The higher the cost, the more debt interest has to be paid by government. And that's money that could be going on schools and hospitals. And it's changing by the minute. In fact, you can see it today. It's going in the wrong direction. As of today, that figure is at a 27-year high. That's caused by lower growth and expectations that interest rates are going to stay higher for longer. But all of that adds up to make Rachel Reeves' life harder. And that's because she is so hemmed in. In her first budget, the Labour Chancellor set herself a hugely ambitious target, which is to have no borrowing at all to fund day-to-day government spending. And look, over the last 20 years, that's just not been achieved at all. All of this is above the 0% line. It just hasn't happened. And now it's forecast, the official projections back in October, forecast for it to happen in a few years' time. But only, look at this, by the narrowest of margins, £9.9 billion. That's the headroom that she's giving herself.
That obviously sounds like a lot, a big figure, but for a government, especially one of our size, a country of our size, it's not a lot.
The wiggle room against her self-imposed borrowing limits.
And that's the key phrase there, self-imposed. Like, she set this limit. So all of these cuts that she's doing is because she wants to hit an arbitrary target that she created for herself. That all day-to-day spending will be funded not by borrowing but by taxes. So you can see here the big problem with that. We haven't had that in a long time. I think that deficit is building way under new Labour as well. Like, you can see how high it is. Like, it does drop a lot, and that's mostly because of austerity and the things the Tories did. And you can see it spikes back up during COVID. It's still not come back down, as you did see some government expansion over this. So the Tories can try and argue that they did actually get the deficit down for day-to-day spend, but they did massively shrink the economy to do it.
If you think that sounds like a lot of money, well, you've got to remember that total government spending is over £1 trillion a year. So it's only really a small amount. And on the back of that rising debt forecasts, the rising debt costs, analysts suggest that that headroom could today be as little as £1 billion. But the real verdict on the headroom that matters comes on March the 26th, when Rachel Reeves returns to the Commons for the spring statement. And that's when the Office for Budget Responsibility pronounces on how much wiggle room she's got. Now, inside the Treasury, they know that on that date, there is a real chance that the OBR rule that she has breached her limits and that they'll have to take action.
Again, breached her limits. This is the key I want people to remember here. She set these stupid targets and I told the Hat Man that these are the things that are going to trip her up, and I was told that's a smokescreen.
Now, I understand that she's determined to stick to these tough borrowing limits, and inside the Treasury, they know that on that day, they cannot tax anymore, so there will only be one choice.
What do you mean they cannot tax anymore? Again, they could put capital gains tax rate as the same rate of income tax, and there's other taxes they could change. The whole reason they don't want to tax more is because they set themselves dumb rules, which is no rise in income tax, no rise in VAT, things like that.
If they do break their limits, Rachel Reeves is going to have to squeeze further growth in public spending.
Again, she's not going to have to do it. She's going to choose to do it because the fact that the economy is cooked and she set herself dumb targets in order to win an election. She has done this to herself.
Yet further. That's going to be really hard. Let me give you some historical context for that. Look at the last 30 years of government spending reviews. That's normally when public spending goes up a fair old chunk. Look at the Blair years, the Brown years. It did drop during the coalition, but under Boris Johnson, it went right back up again. Now look at what Rachel Reeves is planning to do in terms of increasing public spending. So here we have it. This year, big increase, 4.3%. Next year, moderate increase, 2.6%. But after that, she's already planning, really in historical terms, if you look at historical comparisons, relatively modest increases of 1.3%. How can you, if she's in trouble with her fiscal rules, can they scythe yet more money from these already wafer-thin increases without, for instance, and this is what advisors are telling me, breaking manifesto promises? Or maybe she can find money from the welfare budget. Look at this. The welfare budget is absolutely predicted to and forecast to explode. Look, you can see the line going up there. Now look at what that's made.
Just going back to these figures quickly, if this is the projection of the increase in public spending, if it's below inflation, wouldn't these be real terms cuts to government departments and public spending overall? So again, is that not austerity by definition? By not doing things like increasing, at least by the rate of inflation, those are real terms cuts. No,
to explode. Look, you can see the line going up there. Now look at what that's made up of, and you can see the biggest chunk of that isn't children, isn't pensioners, but it's working age people. And for Labour in particular, reducing that, the amount of help that they give to people in work, will be hard and will cause a row. It's all difficult for Rachel Reeves. She's told us that she is the Iron Chancellor, but she's backed herself into something of a corner. It's getting more difficult. She blames the Tories, but then if there have to be further cuts or squeeze spending increases on public spending, will others be that forgiving?
Again, these are choices she will make based on the rules she has set out. You can't set the stage and be mad at the things she put on there. It doesn't make any sense. There's a lot more analysis.
It's been a rough old day for the government on the financial markets. Let's look at UK 10-year borrowing costs, this blue line. And as you said, it's reached a reaction to Liz Truss's mini-budget in 2022. Well, we can see this on this chart here. And the rise in recent weeks hasn't been as sharp as it was back in 2022. But of course now, look, it's at a higher level than it was back then. So why does this matter? Well, essentially, this blue line determines the rate at which the UK government can borrow money and the rate it has to pay on its debt bill. So the rise in this since the budget last year is estimated to be projected to cost the UK government an extra £10 billion a year by the end of the Parliament on its debt bill. And don't forget that Rachel Reeves, in her budget, gave herself only about £10 billion of headroom against her fiscal rules. So unless this picture changes, Rachel Reeves could be faced with the choice of three things. First, either breach her fiscal rules, second, put up taxes again, or third, cut public spending, having pledged not to reintroduce austerity.
Again, the issue with austerity is there's not a massive firm definition of it. There are different kind of definitions of it, so that's going to be the only way she can get out of it. Is I think she's going to look at big budget cuts in certain areas. I think that's what we're going to see here. It's going to be gnarly because I can't imagine they're going to do more tax increases. I think the way they've kind of set it up, it's just not going to work. So I don't know. Sam Coates talked about it previously in October, the day after Rachel Reeves, set out the budget. So he didn't think it was going to go down well, and he's not been wrong. But I don't think it's totally her fault. I have listened to kind of analysis from other people in the space and such, and we'll talk about why this is not 100% down to Rachel Reeves, the market fluctuations and such, but I think the impact of the fiscal rules and the fact that she's having to cut from future budgets is the fault of Rachel Reeves, because again, she set her own dumb rules. There's stories around potentially welfare cuts. They're talking about personal independent payments being cut, and these is money for people with disabilities. So again, why this has to be done on the backs of the disabled, I don't know. The story's not been 100% confirmed, so we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see on that. But yeah, it's not great. There's also, more. There's been quite a few stories around potential welfare cuts. It's not just the Telegraph reporting this. It was also the BBC's Nicholas Watt.
The list of spending cuts is the welfare budget. The way that it was put to me is that budget is due to do that, and it needs to sort of do that, rise at a much less dramatic level. Now, there are two dates that are concentrating minds in the Treasury at the moment. The first is the second fiscal forecast under this budget we'll get from the Office for Budget Responsibility in March, and they will make an assessment of how the Chancellor is doing on her fiscal rules. The first one, the most important one, the stability rule. What that means is that you cannot borrow for day-to-day spending. The Chancellor said she'd meet that rule in 2029, 2030. There's an element of flexibility because it's then in future assessed on a rolling 3-year basis.
Of course, 2029, 2030, there'll be another government in charge by that point anyways. So she might not be held accountable for that one.
But in the Treasury, they know there will be a chart in that report that will tell them how well they're said to be doing heading into 2029. The next one that's concentrating minds is the spending review in June. And that is, I'm told, the theme of that is cuts, not tax rises, of how you deal with that welfare right there. We did have from Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary, in November, a white paper called Get Britain Working, which did talk about young people losing benefits if they don't take up work. In the spring, another green paper from Liz.
So that's obviously a Conservative Party policy, that one.
Liz Kendall on health and disability reform, and what they're talking about is delivering the savings that were identified by the last government, but the view in this Treasury is that they weren't credible, and Liz Kendall's going to put a sort of a Labour slant on that. The view in the Treasury is they're trying to say, look, they are reasonably relaxed about what was happening in the markets today. They're talking about global factors. The Tories are saying it's as a result of a budget that increased taxes. And talking about...
Again, a budget from October, it's not very believable, is it?
About a market judgment that the Monetary Policy Committee is not perhaps going to be bringing interest rates down as fast as they should. But there was a statement from the Treasury today. No one should be under any doubt that meeting the fiscal rules is non-negotiable. Quite a statement to release.
I've never find someone who loves you as much as Rachel Reeves loves her fiscal rule firm. Just find someone loyal to it to the end, even though it's the thing destroying her. There's a tweet here from Kitty Donaldson. So again, she's another kind of well-connected kind of journalist commentator, saying some Labour MPs are now privately discussing the possibility of a hike on VAT or income tax, and this is despite the fact that Labour ruled out those increasing those two specific taxes, VAT and income tax. So there are real problems here because of the idiocy around what she set out. Reeves considers imposing steeper cuts to public services to repair government finances. So you've got different things here being discussed in terms of cutting welfare, cutting public services, and increasing certain taxes that they've ruled out. So it's not looking good for the UK's economy. And we'll see if this plans out. I did see under here there was one of the worst tweets ever. You got them people kind of pushing back on Owen Jones here, but Owen Jones saying that they're deliberately briefing right-wing papers with this, and it might be a kite flying exercise. That's what Max Robespierre said. It's very possible. We don't know yet. We're gonna have to wait and see, but it's not looking good. That's the point. What they have done by setting these stupid rules is, first of all, put themselves in a position where they're gonna have to come up with dumb solutions, and secondly, they're gonna have to try and convince people that there's a way out of this, even though the whole problem is the rules they set out. Other countries have higher debt to GDP ratios than us, and they're not falling apart.
Of things, I think there's a tendency, and Chris has just reflected it very fluently, of Labour to explain the problem on the economy, describe it as if it were kind of giving a tutorial to the country. But I think what the country's interested in now is, this is clearly, people understand it at different levels, they sometimes misunderstand things, but overall it's clearly not a good position. Right. Is there anything that Rachel Reeves can do that can get back on track from a budget which, while well-intentioned and to fill that hole in public finances, by the way, I don't accept the 21 billion, it is an interpretation, it's not, right. it's not a fact.
Can you hold
a mixture of things?
Yeah, I think Reeves is going to have to offer solutions. There was no point talking about, you can keep talking. I think that she should mention that the Conservatives cook the economy. That's fine. She's got to talk about solutions here. That's the key. The public don't know what fiscal rules are. They don't care for them. It's, can you get us out of this mess? Are you going to be able to improve public services like you promised? Or, what are you going to do with the next few years? Because people need change here. And the question is, what will Rachel Reeves do if the higher cost of borrowing eats the government's fiscal headroom, which is something she was desperately needed because of the fact that she is trying to bring public spending, stop borrowing for day-to-day spend. The OBR reports back the 26th of March, which we heard before, is expected to downgrade forecasts, which will mean that she won't have that 9.9 billion, headroom that she said. You got this guy here who writes for The Times saying, for some unprotected departments, the scale of cuts involved will look and feel like austerity 2.0. We've heard of departments, needing to find 5% cuts in efficiency and whatever like that, right? Despite the fact that the civil service has barely been invested in during the Tories' time. Departments looking at shrinkage and things like that. It's just, this is silly. this is silly for our Labour government to do. And if you are one of the people that voted for her, then well done, you voted for austerity again. You might as well vote for George Osborne at this point. But point being is, like, the situation the economy's in is not 100% her fault, in terms of this specific situation with the bond market. There are other issues with her, kind of the national insurance increase she has done, which will put businesses off investing in the UK. That is on her, because the way she went about it. So it just depends. It's hard to kind of separate out certain issues, but this is one of the things we have to kind of try and do. The bond sell-off hits the UK, has left the economic project of Rachel Reeves in tatters. And this one from Bloomberg saying, important context to the market turmoil. To date, this mess is far less extreme than the Liz Truss mini budget, which caused a huge bond sell-off. Like, it was massive, a huge problem, but it still needs urgent sorting. Plugging that gap will require tax hikes, spending cuts, or both. And this is what I mean, like, because they set their dumb fiscal rules. And now we're in a situation where Rachel Reeves will try and show that she's listened to the market this week by hauling in a group of Britain's leading regulators and telling them, quote, "You've got to get serious about growth. I want your ideas about how you're going to stop regulating for risk and go for growth instead," end quote. And this is the kind of territory you think, like, what are you doing? Like, the whole point of regulators is to regulate for risk, because that's what gets consumers in trouble. When you look at these specific ones, right? The Competition and Markets Authority, you've got Ofcom, Ofgem, the Environmental Agency. How is the Environmental Agency meant to create growth? What are they supposed to do? What do you want them to kind of greenlight bad operations so that we can set up a factory in a place it shouldn't be, or lower pollution targets so that factory is going to emit more and produce more stuff? What was the Environmental Agency meant to do there for growth? It's stupidity. The FCA, they deal with financial stuff, I think, predominantly. What do you want them to do? Lower regulation so that people can increase leverage on trade, or do other dumb decisions. Like, this is absolute idiocy right here. It's driving me nuts. You don't ask regulators to promote growth. If you want deregulation, put it through via legislation, or change their remit. Fundamentally change their remit. Do not put this on the regulators. You do it yourself, so when it goes wrong, at least we'll know your fingerprints are on it. This is cowardice. She plans to see 16 regulators, half this week, half the next week, after, quote, last year the Prime Minister told them to come up with ideas on how they're going to boost growth, end quote. A Treasury source said, quote, "We need to see them now." The Chancellor hopes to foster competition amongst them in the drive for the best ideas. Like, this is absolute, just the height of irresponsibility from a government. Like, to try and push regulators for ideas for growth shows you that this lot are out of ideas. She's desperate. Looking for growth in this economy is simply not going to work. And the fact is, the sad fact, the fundamental fact is, I don't think this is fundamentally on her, this recent bond sell-off. Because, like I said, other people have discussed how the budget was in October. I don't think the changes have been fully implemented yet. I think what's changed is the fact that the yield on US bond markets has risen to, the interest rate has risen on it. It's reached as high as 4.79%. It's highest since November 2023. And there are fears, I think, around kind of the UK in terms of growth and financial stability. And so people have sold off UK bonds and have gone to buy American bonds, potentially. That's what's happened here. The only funny thing is that, Donald Trump talked about how, they don't have to pay back debts or whatever a few years ago. So I wonder what those traders are going to do if he follows through on that. But I think ultimately the situation currently is not her fault. But she has set up, it was a house of cards she set up anyways. And when we go back to, the original bit here, it was incredibly thin what she had set up. And it was, based on the idea that the UK somehow would get growth. And what's happened? Q3 last year, no growth. Q4 last year, we don't know. Q1 this year is looking bad according to Bloomberg and other kind of outlets. So you're not going to achieve it. So all you're going to do is do what George Osborne did, which is you're going to achieve nothing positive. Anyways, all you're going to see is more shrinkage. This is just an awful idea from these people. I just don't get it. Imagine knowing, being told the fiscal rules will be a huge problem for Labour, and just putting your fingers in your ears and laugh and just ignoring it and calling people Tory enablers and things like that. And this situation we're in now. And then you've got those same certain people who don't talk about the Labour Party, who put their fingers in their ears again and don't want to discuss how bad a situation it is. Those people who said they were going to push Labour to the left, where are those people? I don't see them anymore. It's tragic. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.